Ash and Renee, Ash and Renee, Ash and Renee, Ash and Renee show. Hey y'all, it's Ash and Renee.
Howdy.
Howdy. So I can't believe it's already been another year. Here we are again talking about rookies. So how come you're so invested in rookies? What's your deal?
Um, I don't know really. I think like just through playing Dynasty and stuff, I think you have to be.
Mhm.
Like I think that if you're not, then there's no real need for you to really play it that much. I think you have to like Devi is completely different. I mean, you've got to
Mhm.
be hardcore for Devi, but you have to be like semi up together with your at least one class that is coming up. So this 23 class, everybody really should know by now, especially if they're playing Dynasty. So that I always think that you don't have to watch a ton of college football really either to know sort of who's good and who's not in regards to the rankings. So I think that as long as you pay a little bit attention to say the podcast you listen to or even some of the stuff that you watch on like NFL Network and that now, it's really draft driven at this point of the year. So for you to not know some of these guys is would be a little bit weird if it was me personally. But I know it's understandable not knowing like third and fourth round guys, and some people won't even get drafted are probably rookie rank now, but it's just a case of knowing sort of the gems that you can try and find and try and use that to your advantage really, I guess.
So third and fourth round guys, that sounds like Adrian's people. So
Mm.
he should be investing heavily in learning about them.
Adrian probably knows them all, to be fair. I
I'm
don't know. I
sure.
don't know. Yeah, he
So
knows exactly.
you always end up in some precarious or some place where I don't understand how the hell you get there. Like all of a sudden you're interviewing some of these folks at the stadium. How do you get access, and what the heck is your gig over there in the UK?
Um, I got sort of introduced to a couple of guys, and basically did a few podcasts through them, and then one of their guys said, "Oh, do you want to do like a Chargers one?" So we did one of those, like an offset channel of First and 10. But the bloke who runs First and 10, he's been avid NFL guy for a while, and it's a lot easier to get access over here than it is obviously for you guys to get access, just because the media is not as big. When the bigger superstars come over, like Rogers came over and Brady's over and things like that, it can get a bit more difficult to get access. But with the one this year, like I got offered a few. Where do you want to go to? So I drove to Watford, which is about an hour from me, to the Grove Hotel where England football team used to train. So and then they just said, "Oh, you can get access through there." So when we turned up, there was like BBC, ITV, and stuff. So basically, there was a few people that you would know as well. I think Claire Danes was there. He does a lot of the reporting for them, the NFL Network. It's like super friendly, and everyone there's really relaxed. So like all the people that I met, because I'm not like big fish at all. Like it literally, like we probably broadcast to maybe a few thousand people tops. Um, and we run like a Facebook page and stuff sometimes. So it's just things like that. And then, but he knows a lot of people. So it's just networking really. And then he said, "Oh, do you want to go to one of the training camps?" So I chose the Packers to go to. There was a Giants fan. He went to the Giants one. A few people that went to Jags and Denver and stuff. So I guess that opportunity will arise again this year coming up. I think it's the Bills are over here, the Jags are over here again, and I think it's the Titans. But I don't know who they're playing yet, so it'd be interesting to see who they get. Obviously, I'd love it if it was the Chargers, but obviously, if it's not, it's still cool to go and experience it and see some of these guys up close because they are mountain men. Some of them, absolute huge guys, make me look like a small child.
So when will you be important enough to interview Russell Wilson?
Probably never. To be
Okay,
fair,
good to know.
probably never. Yeah,
All right. That's awful cool.
it was cool. It was really cool. I think I've got my parts here somewhere.
And there is his wardrobe. Oh, look at that.
Yeah. So got that through basically for the London International Series. So it's really cool. And obviously it's got the teams on it that you're allowed to go. Because obviously
And
people just
the
do that every year.
podcast you said is First and 10?
First and 10, yeah. So we do like the it's very like relaxed. It's not overly too analytic driven, shall we say. It's more opinion based. There's a couple of guys on there that some's like, the one's a big Patriots fan, one's a big Seahawks fan and stuff, and they're just like, we just chat about what we think, and it's more broad NFL stuff. But this time of year we do like a lot of draft stuff. So I did like a linebackers podcast the other day, which is like, it's pretty brutal to be fair, because the class is crap. So but we did like a wide receiver one, and we've done ones like I sent one to Tony the other day about how to. I did a podcast about how to get ahead in dynasty football, because he was like, "Oh, I'm really interested in like some of your podcasts." I said, "Oh, we just done one recently. It was about a week ago, and it was just like 6 things you should do if you're a dynasty owner and what you should sort of look for." And it's not like, oh yeah, go and trade for this player or anything. It's just like general stuff. So like, I think like step one was like, know your league mates. So it's basically like, make sure you know who they support, who they don't like, things like that, because it can get you an advantage in who you're trading for and who you're trading away in some respects. So say if you've got Deebo Samuel and you go to someone that hates 49ers and someone that likes 49ers, the person that's going to like 49ers is going to give you way more than the person that hates 49ers for Deebo Samuel. So just things like that, like how to get ahead and stuff like that, which is quite interesting to do.
So maybe I can get the links to the podcast from you, and then I can include them in the notes for this this podcast.
Yeah, no problem.
So that podcast sounds much less scientific and analytical than the NDL Weekly.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
If I'm honest, most of it is just like pure bias of some of the players
no bias in NDL Weekly. So yeah, I could totally get you there. Well, let's get started. So we got a quarterback class this year that's got probably about 5 or 6 of the top ones, and then everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And so what do you think about this year's class?
I think you pretty much nailed on the head with it. I think that there's concerns with a few aspects of some of the players. No one's a perfect prospect. I think that there's probably 2 guys coming out in 24 that would be way better than the 2 that are coming out, or 4 that are coming out this year. But it's still very good. They're still really good prospects. So I would say you're going to have, like, there's going to be probably 4 in the top 10 of the actual draft, and then Hendon Hooker's the one that's like, is he going to get in the first round? Is he not, sort of thing. But I think there's going to probably the 4 guys that most people are going to know about. They're going to probably go in the top 10 just because there's so many neat quarterback needy teams. So it's still a good class though. And I think that if you stick on the tape of Texas versus Alabama, you'll fall in love with Bryce Young. If you watch, I think it was the Georgia game, in the national championship for CJ Stroud. If you watch that, you're going to be like, CJ Stroud's my pick for sure. Like, so there is, and if you watch Robinson versus Utah, is a good one. You'll fall in love with Robinson against Utah. So there is some games on there which you just think like, wow, these guys could easily be the first pick in your fantasy drafts. But then there's some games where maybe you're just a little bit more concerned with certain aspects, like Stroud's mobility in some ways, Bryce Young's, I would say weight, to be honest. I'm not too worried about his height. Like, I know he's not very tall, but he's quite thin. So that would maybe be my only concern with Bryce Young. And then Robinson and Levis, some of their accuracy things can be a bit hit and miss. But other than that, I think the classes are okay. It's worlds apart from last year's class. Last year's class was absolute terrible. So for Superflex, it's going to make it a bit more spicy for players, for like, obviously, because there's going to be 4, maybe 5 quarterbacks going round 1. Then you're talking about a lot of the depth from wide receiver and running back and stuff falling back down to late round 1. So you're going to get a bit more value than you would have done last year. I mean, last year was fucking awful for quarterbacks. So
how do you rank them?
Hooker would be 5. In regards of fantasy purposes, Levis would be 4. And then it gets kind of interesting because obviously Robinson is just so unique because of how he is, and everyone knows how Cam Newton was for fantasy. Like, Robinson's definitely not the finished article by any means. And I think that depending on what team he sits behind, drafts him, you might have to sit a year. So then are you, like, if you're taking him, so 1-1, if you're really fantasy driven in your rookie draft, and you've got to wait a year, are you losing the value as soon as you draft him in some respects? So it's interesting to see how which team drafts Robinson. It could really shoot him up the board. It might put him as like, he's definitely going to be because he has got the potential to be like a Jalen Hurts or a Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson, because he's that athletic. It's just freaky. But you might have to wait on the value of that, because obviously some of them guys, they weren't that value when you first drafted them. So paying that 1.3, 1.4 in super flexes might be a bit pricey for some people if they've got to wait for their value to work out. He would probably be 2, and then these two are like 1A and 1B, because it is, I think, depending on how you see the draft positions go. At the moment, it looks like it's Stroud for the Panthers, just with how much they seem to just absolutely love him at the pro day, and the betting seems to say that it's going to be Stroud. But there's a few people like Daniel Jeremiah and stuff that still think it might be Young. So it's still interesting to see how that will work out. I would probably have Stroud 1, just because I think he's safer. I think you're going to get sort of a longevity out of him, and he'll always recoup a lot of value. He kind of in like that Joe Burrow mode in some respects, so you kind of like, you know what you're going to get. Bryce Young, I think, is more talented, but I do worry about his weight. To be honest, that's my only concern about him. To be honest, other than that, he can make things happen. Like, that's sort of not Pat Mahomes-esque, but it's pretty darn close. He's just miraculous in what he can do, and everything just seems slow motion for him. He just seems to just make the right decision nearly all the time. So his completion percentage is just like nuts at the college football. It's like, I think he's like over the 2.5 years, like 8,000 yards and like 86 touchdowns and like 10 interceptions. The QB rating is like 165 or something stupid. So he's an amazing player. It's just, if he went to the Texans, which is what's presumed, they'd have to draft somebody wide receiver, and if I'm honest, they'd have to draft some interior guys, because I'd still be a bit worried about him getting hit through the middle. So that's my only concern. But I would have Hooker 5, Levis 4, Robinson a close 2, and then I'd have Bryce Young 1B and Stroud 1A, just on value of where you can get them, and basically, like, I think longevity, maybe.
Yeah, I'm not too far off. I think I have Young ahead of Stroud, because I think they're gonna I still think Young might go first with Panthers. So it'll be interesting to see where they land. And as far as weight goes, I'm worried about my weight. Okay, so that's quarterbacks. Anything else you want to say about the quarterbacks?
I don't really. I would definitely look around. Maybe it's on the actual draft happens, and just see where some interesting guys land. Like, I'm not trying to kill myself in regards to, like, most of you guys would know this anyway, but I would be interested. Like last year, people were getting like Sam Howell late. They were getting other guys late. Maybe Matt Corral's a bad example now, but there's potential there. If you look at it and think there's an avenue for him to either get snaps or be a backup or something that could add value to that team. So say if, like, I don't know, you own whoever as a quarterback, say it's Jimmy Garoppolo, and they don't get Levis, but in round 4 they get someone like Tanner or something like that, then it might be that you go, oh, actually, this, I could maybe pick someone up here 302 in your rookie drafts, and then you kind of locked in, as say if you had Garoppolo, you locked in as Raiders QBs in some respects. So I would just keep an eye on the actual draft to see where some of these other guys fall. I don't know if they're going to be that fantasy relevant straight away, but you never know. You could find a Kirk Cousins later on or something like that. I'd say the one guy I think that might be a half decent player is Dorian Thompson. I think he plays for UCLA. Mm-hmm. Which I think that, like, he's going to be a late round draft in the actual draft. I think he'd probably go round 6, but if he falls in the right spot, he's got the potential there to be a half decent quarterback. So I'd keep an eye on where he falls. But there's a couple of other guys that are half decent, but I just watch for the NFL draft and see who falls in some interesting positions, and then target them.
Yeah, he's definitely picked up some ground at the combine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see. All right, let's hit the running backs. So obviously we got Bijan at the top.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so which is pretty much going to be all Tony.
Pretty much, yeah. After him sniping me.
Well, and I believe he has he has the 101 in 3
Yeah,
leagues.
he said in 3 leagues, yeah, NFL, GA now, and JB. So I said, well, I hope it pans out, mate, because that's a hell of a lot
Right,
to
for
go in.
reals. So obviously we're not going to necessarily discuss the pros and cons of Bijan because that's been discussed a lot. But where do you think what's your prediction on where he lands?
I had this discussion the other day on a podcast, and they were like, "Oh, I'm not sure he's going to go early in the first round," and I said, like, if you compare him to other running backs that have gone like in the first round recently, like Saquon, Najee Harris. Saquon went 2, Najee Harris went 21. He's loads closer to Barkley than he is Najee. So for me, I can't see him dropping further than 21, at least in the actual NFL draft. So all these people say, "Oh, I'm going to get him." Bills could get him, like Cincinnati could get him. Unless they trade up, there's no way they're going to get him because most of the things I've heard is most GMs are saying like he's in their top 7, 8 players, full stop, out of everybody in the whole thing. And after a while, like people will draft that over some random like some high-end guy in a premium position. At the end of the day, there's still some GMs out there that will go for the blue chip guy rather than, oh, you need edge rushers, you need corners, left tackles, and so forth. But after a while, it's like you can't pass on this like superstar running back or superstar safety, or just because they're not as glamorous positions as you would do in the actual NFL draft. I think that he's going to go way closer to Barkley, like high up in that round 1. So personally, for me, I think in my recent mock that I did, I think I had him going to Atlanta at 7. So it's something that Atlanta would do. They're so run heavy. Obviously, Arthur Smith came over from the Titans, and they were Derrick Henry, so he was running him into the ground. So it would be something that I could see happen. Personally, I don't think he falls any further than the Texans at 12. Because that would be pretty cool for the Texans to just overload. Like if they went, I don't know, Bryce Young at 2 and then Bijan at 12 that's completely transformed that offense completely. So it would be a really cool thing for them to do, something like that. So, but I just can't see them. They've got, I think it's 7's Falcons, 8 is actually I don't know if 7 is Falcons, 8 is Falcons. Bears at 9, they could easily take him.
Mm-hmm.
And 10 Philadelphia, they could easily take him. And then knowing what Tennessee's like, and they're cleaning house at the moment, so a few people have murmured that obviously that Derrick Henry was going to get shopped at one point. So you could, and they did it last year in the draft. They literally sold AJ Brown and then drafted Burks in the same draft on draft night. So it could be something as interesting. You could see something interesting like that happen where Tennessee go to the podium, draft Bijan, and then 5-10 picks later, you hear Titans have traded Derrick Henry for pick 26 or pick 35 or whatever it is, and all of a sudden it's complete role reversal. Everyone's thinking, oh, that Titans are locked with Derrick Henry, and they go and do something like that. So I can't see him really falling past 12-ish because he's far closer to Barkley than he is Najee.
Well, I think that's going to be very exciting, and I hope that the draft will be better than our free agency period because that's been kind of like a bore.
Yeah, it's been really boring.
I think I wouldn't rule out the idea of a AJ Brown kind of thing going on. Like DeAndre Hopkins might not get traded until then. Oh, there you go. You were stuck.
There we go. Yeah, I was stuck.
Okay, so who's next after Bijan?
I've got Gibbs 2,
Mm-hmm.
but he's very close with the guy that's 3rd. Gibbs, like if anyone's watching any Alabama tape, great in open space, probably good for outside zone schemes. Something like Dolphins would be really good if he landed something like that. So he reminds me. Most podcasts I've done, you bring up the Alvin Kamara comp because he's very much similar to him. He's a bit lighter and a bit thinner, but he runs him sort of style quite nasty, good in open space, great at catching the ball. So he's going to be a really good player, especially for PPR drafts and stuff like that. 3, I've got Chabanat, whatever they call him. But he's more of your bulldozing type. Still really good in regards to catching the ball, can definitely still do that. He ran quicker in combine than I thought he would do, so that's really pushed him closer to Gibbs personally, just because I think that you can kind of use him more than I thought he was going to be like an early down guy. They probably will just use him as the early down back, but he is a lot better at receiving than people give him credit for. So I think that he's going to be he's definitely like the ideal size in NFL, and I think that people that if they're in traditional sort of running schemes, they'll probably target him, which would be interesting. And then it starts to get really interesting after that because it's quite deep after that. So there's some really good running backs after that. Most people would probably have A-Chain from Texas A&M at 4, legit speed, like Olympic legit speed. I think it was 4.32. I think at combine. But if you see him in space, he's like really, really quick. Very like CJ Spillery kind of player. Kind of reminds me a little bit of him, to be honest. So I would say it would be fun to see where he goes, because if he goes to a team which is like they play a lot of 3 wide and they got light boxes, then that would be really fun. So I would definitely target him. So I reckon a lot of people will probably target him late round 1 in our rookie drafts in NDL. And then after that, there is quite a few guys personally. Tajay Spears had a really good Senior Bowl. Sean Tucker didn't do a lot of the combine because of an injury, but they said that he did like a small workout, and he looks like he could be quite good. Size is a little bit. I think he's 5'9", but he's got good hands and a lot stockier than I thought he was going to be. So he looks a good part. And then there's loads. I mean, Kendra Miller from TCU is a good player. Zach Evans, Ole Miss. He's a bit of a beast. There's a couple of guys that I'd be worried about. They've got fumbles in college, like McBride. He looks good, but I think that he could end up like that David Wilson sort of player from the Giants, where he got on and it just didn't seem to work. I know Wilson got injured in the end, but there's a few guys that don't fall in the right spots. And I think that this class, if I'm honest, it is quite deep, but it'll really address the rankings once these players get drafted. So if you can see a clear pathway, I know the talent wins out in the end, but if they're stuck behind 2 other talented guys, then they're going to get a lot of less ranked, I would say, in most. But then you might find some good players later on, talented players in round 3 and 4 of your rookie drafts, but you just have to be patient with them because the landing spot might not be great. But yeah, it's a very, very good deep class. Trying to think if there's any real sleepers, I would say. The guy from Pitt, I think it's Abiakanda. I think that don't rest on him. I think that he might be late day 2, early day 3. I think that he's very straight line, but once he's gone, he's a hard to catch kind of guy. And it'd be interesting to see where Deuce Vaughn falls, because Deuce Vaughn, I don't know if anyone knows about Deuce Vaughn, but he is tiny, like super, super tiny. I think it's 5'5". But if you watch him at the combine, his drills were outstanding. Like his footwork was outstanding. And he could be what everyone hoped Tariq Cohen was going to be. So I think that if he falls in the right landing spot, he could be. Like, I remember doing one of these with you guys like 2 years ago, and I pointed out Khalil Herbert as a sleeper, and I think that there could be that kind of potential for Deuce, because I think he's got such good work ethic and stuff like that. And if he can stay healthy, I know that he's not the biggest of guys, but if you watch him at Kansas State, he was just excellent. So I think that he'll be underdrafted because of his size and because of his sort of weight. But if you watch the drills at the combine and you watch his tape, you're like, this guy is seriously good runner. So I'd be looking at him as sort of like one of them sleepers. You'd probably have to wait on him, but he's a nice player to add to your roster. And then think, actually, I think we've got a talented player here. We just have to wait for the timing of the team that he's on.
My sleeper, which is also a homer pick, is Chase Brown out of Illinois.
Yep.
He
had a great combine.
He led rushing records for the year for a long time. Really did well, but for some reason he just wasn't given much recognition. So he'll be interesting. But go Illinois, fighting a lot.
Yeah, he's a good player. He's a really good player. Yeah. So, and I think that, like you said, that some of these you'll get more of a clarification on the rankings once the draft happens, because it's like you've kind of got like a top three that everybody knows about. A-Chain's kind of like the next one down, and then it just gets really muddy because there's just guys that it's like, do you need a pounder? Do you need a catcher? Like there's like I think it's Evan Hull, someone from Northwestern. If you've got him, if PPI is probably the best receiver in the whole, nearly one of the whole drafts, but he's not probably going to go until like round 7 in the actual draft. But you kind of got to keep your eyes on them and see where they land, because if you think, oh, they dump off a lot to running backs, or this happens or that happens, then your rankings, it will push guys up, and obviously draft capital as well. Like if you see some of these running backs going like round 3, then I'd be like, hang on a minute, I need to keep an eye on who's this guy that's just gone in round 3, like, because like running backs now, they're just 2 a penny in some respects, which is a bit of a shame. Like Austin Eckler's looking for a trade, can't even get anything, and he wants more than like 7 million. It's like, nah, we don't want to pay you any more than 7 million, thanks. So he's like, and this guy's come off the back of 22 touchdown seasons, like undrafted free agent, and that's kind of where it's just a killer for them, these guys at the moment. So, and I think that in our drafts it would be kind of the similar, like one guy will be like, oh, we really had him highly ranked. Like last year, everyone was really highly ranked Spiller. Now, really, like I know that he's in at the Chargers, but last year people were taking him like as like the third running back or running back, like mid-round ones. And now they're like a throw-in, like, oh yeah, because Kelly was a lot better than him last year, and there's a chance, like there's a lot of talk on Chargers media that Bijan, if he falls to 21, Chargers definitely take him because of this Eckler situation. So all of a sudden, this mid-round one guy that you took last year is we're hoping for, is now non-existent. So it's really, you got to be really careful with running backs, especially because of their longevity is just really difficult. So I always try and stay clear of building my whole dynasty roster around them. They're great if you're in the win now mode and you're pretty much ready to go, but I don't know if I would want to count on a lot of these guys after, say, I think A-Chain's going to be pretty high pick just because he's so quick. But after A-Chain, a lot of these guys won't be like highly drafted players in the actual draft, but they're definitely guys to keep an eye on, and they're good. They are good running backs. It's just that they're just 2 a penny now. Like they're just 2 a penny. Like you can get people like Kareem Hunt aren't even signed yet, and some of these guys like aren't even nowhere near as good as Kareem Hunt, and he's still on the market. So you kind of got to be a bit wary about that.
Yeah. I was listening to a podcast recently where they were talking about the players union really trying to advocate for shorter rookie contracts for running backs because they don't really get a shot at it.
Yeah, it's a good idea. That's a really good idea.
I think it's fair, certainly for the players, but it would be crap for the teams because then they'd have to pay quicker, and I'm sure they don't want to do that. But
if we've learned anything from free agency this year, like even when it's coming down to things like this, like Ramsey got traded, the Aaron Rodgers deal that's coming up, and even throughout what we've seen, like Schultz and other players, none of these guys have got paid yet, and they haven't really got paid an awful lot because teams just don't want to fork out money anymore. They just don't want. They're just tight. So like all these people that said about, oh, it's sort of the compensation that's holding up the Aaron Rodgers deal, and it's the compensation that's holding up the Lamar Jackson deal. It's not. It's not paying 2 first-round picks for Lamar Jackson, because most teams would do it. Like, other than 6 teams, most teams would do it. It's the money that you have to pay these guys afterwards, and it's no different with any position. Jalen Ramsey is way better than the 3rd-round pick you're going to get. Way, way, way better. But it's because Jalen Ramsey wants 20 odd million a year, and half the teams just don't want to pay it. So it's nothing to do with the compensation that these teams have to pay. And it's the same with Aaron Rodgers. Like, the Jets probably just like, yeah, we'll give you a late one. They probably won't, because they don't need to, because the Packers are just as desperate to remove him from their bill, because if they don't trade him before June 1st, they're going to have to stomach about, I think it's nearly 98 odd million in dead cap if they don't move him before June 1st, where if they move him before, it's only about 40 million. So you're talking about stupid money. So it's like, oh yeah, they're holding out for this first. In the end, they're gonna take whatever the Jets give them, because they can't afford to keep Aaron Rodgers on their roster anymore. So, and especially if he retires in some, which is what he said he was 90% going to be doing. So I think that, like you said, money talks, especially at the moment, and offering these running backs big contracts, just the teams just don't want to do it, because unfortunately for these guys, they are kind of to a penny at the moment, which is sad state of play, because obviously a lot of teams were used to be built around that. But now, I think Zach put it up the other day as well, like the last teams with the Super Bowl winners and their rushing leader at that season, like Garrett Blunt had 3, and Pacheco, and you see like you just don't need a superstar running back to run a perfectly good offense and a Super Bowl winning team. So that's why they're not getting paid.
All right, so let's move on to wide receivers. So this is an interesting class, and I've been hearing names are moving around much more, I think, within the wide receiver rankings than any other.
Yeah.
So where do you end up with wide receivers?
I've got a clear one, and then I've got 3, and then I've got another one, and then I've got a big mess after that, kind of similar to the running backs. But my clear one is Jackson Smith and Jigba. Just everyone's been doubting certain aspects because he's not really good at one thing. And last year he was obviously injured loads. But the season before, if you check his stats, watch his tape, he was on the field with Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, and he didn't look out of place at all. And he finished the season with 1,600 yards, 10 touchdowns. Like, he can do everything, this guy. And if I was doing a startup and I had the sort of the 1-3 or something, 1-2, 1-3, and it wasn't super flex, obviously, and I'm looking to build around someone, I need to sort my team out. My team's aging, I'm not quite there. This would be the guy I'm targeting over Bijan, because running backs, obviously, they don't last as long. But I personally think this guy's going to last 10 years in the NFL, and his value isn't hardly ever going to drop. It's going to be kind of that Amari Cooper sort of player where everybody kind of doesn't really, he just hovers at certain aspects. And I just think that he's just going to be value for whichever team drafts him in our leagues, because you're just going to hold him and he's just going to be putting up great numbers every year. You haven't got to worry about him. You just plug him in, wide receiver 2, happy days. And like, if you're building a dynasty, you need players that are just going to be consistent for you every week. Like, the up and down thing, it doesn't work in dynasty too much, because you'll have a great year and then all of a sudden they just fall off a cliff. So, but I just don't see it with this guy. I just see him as being that absolute rock solid wide receiver for you, if you're going to build around it for fantasy.
Where are you imagining he's going?
If I was the Texans, I would definitely be teaming him up at the pick 12. I know we keep jumping on the Texans, but if you're taking a quarterback, we always talk about this every year. If you're taking a quarterback high, surround him with weapons straight away. Like, Texans just don't have really anybody other than Robert Woods now and Dalton Schultz. But you kind of need, if if you can put a quarterback on a rookie deal and a wide receiver on a rookie deal now, because wide receivers money is just sky high after what Kirk did last year. You've got two people on that are super premier positions on such small contracts. So if I was a Texan, I'd definitely be looking to team up my quarterback with a superstar wide receiver. And personally, for me, he's the best one. Will he be there? Probably. I think the only kind of team that might take him is Tennessee, which is one pick ahead. So yeah, I would say Texans is probably, I would be pretty much bang on. I think Texans should be taking him, but do they take him? Because they quite like the big bodied guy. Their history says it. Andre Johnson, DeAndre Hopkins. Their history says that they'll probably take Quentin Johnson, which is probably number 2 on my list. But I personally think Smith and Jigba for what he, especially say if Young, like you're right, say if Young went 1 to the Panthers, then all of a sudden you've got CJ Stroud sitting there at 2. You cannot pass on Smith and Jigba if you've just drafted CJ Stroud. These two have played together for like 2 years, and you're like, hang on a minute, I've just taken a quarterback that I believe in, and I can partner him with a wide receiver that he's worked with for 2 years. I'm one step ahead of the game. So that it would be silly, if I'm honest, if the Texans didn't do something like that at pick 12.
Yeah, it's an NFL stack.
For sure. And I think Andrew Luck, the Colts did it that year when they took Andrew Luck. They took Andrew Luck and then they took Kobe Fleener in round 2. And he was the tight end of Andrew Luck that year. Like, it's sensible to do that because they kind of know each other. You've got someone in the building that you can kind of work with and rapport off of, and just think it's a sensible thing to do. Like, I don't know why teams don't do it more often.
All right. I thought you were crazy smart before, but now that you're pulling out Kobe Fleener facts, I don't know, man.
I met Kobe Fleener. That's why.
Did you?
That's the only reason I know. Yeah, he came over for a Sky Sports. Event, and we did. We had a QB thing that we did, and I met Andrew Luck came over. It was like a QB masterclass, and then Kobe Fleener was there, and so we were all catching balls with him and bits and pieces like that. So they're really, really nice guys. Really nice guys.
Well, so then I'm one person removed from all these folks. Since I met you and had a drink with you, I've actually kind of met, in a sense, Kobe.
Yeah, Fleener. You have, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's nice. Me and Kobe Fleener. All right. So who do you got number 2?
Who's Quentin Johnson? Just because he's probably like the big X guy that everybody's going to want to target in this sort of in this draft. There's not really anybody like him other than that. Like, he's not amazing. I don't know if he's really like the big X guys that we're used to, and we hope that he does everything perfectly, but he's very, very good. Like, he high points the ball really well. He's got legit speed, but not super, super legit speed. I don't know if he's really that great coming out of transition, but as soon as he does, then yards after the catch is a lot better than people give him credit for. So if you watch his tape, he's actually, they do a lot of bubble screens and things like that with him, and he can chunk off some yardage. But because he's 6'4", like, there's not really anyone else in this draft that's that big, that quick, and that sort of like that has got that high end production that he's had for the last couple of years. So he's the 2, and so someone's going to take him and use him very well. So kind of be that like Drake London sort of player. So a lot of people are going to really like him, and they should do, because he's a good player.
All right, then who else you got?
I've got Zay Flowers and Addison. Is the next 2. Zay, I've got a soft spot for Zay Flowers. He's kind of my Elijah Moore that year. He is very Steve Smith-esque. Just he's tiny in regards to like height and stuff, but he is so quick out of breaks. Just seems to find the space really well. Great route runner. And once he's got the ball in his hands, he's got legit speed as well. So I think 4.42 or 4.4 something at the combine. So he is a really good player. Addison would be next, and he's more of your polished route runner. Probably the best route runner in the draft. But my only concern is he isn't as quick as some of the guys I would like him to be. If he was half a second quicker, well, not half a second, but you know what I mean, 0.005% quicker, he would probably be 2 on my list, to be honest. But I don't know if he's got that sort of, if he's going to be able to get away from separation, because he's majority a slot player. So it'd be interesting to see where he falls, really. But he has a route run who's great. Like I said, in that sort of like Ridley mold, Keenan Allen mold, etc. But I just worry that I don't know if he's really got the brain that much at the moment to find the space. But we shall see. Like, I still think he's going to be a good player in the NFL. It just, maybe you might have to pump the brakes on how quickly he's going to be that good. Like, it might take a couple of years to then break out, and you think, actually, now I've got a player on my hands. So he would be 4. And then Jalen Hyatt would be 5. Just, he's the vertical speed guy. He's kind of like Will Fuller in some respects. But he only broke out this year because Tillman was the guy before that. And then this year, like with Hendon Hooker there, they just sort of had he just blew up. So things like before he'd never put up more than like 400 yards or something. And then this year he put like 1,500. So it's like, a minute, where does this come from? But he looks like a really good player, but I think that it might be, depends on if you like them boom or bust guys, that it might not be up your street at number 5.
And who are your sleepers?
Jalen Reed, Michigan State. I really like him. Marvin Mims, Oklahoma, really like him. Again, both of these guys, depending on where they fall, they might be steals in your actual draft, like proper steals. Like, I think they could be like top of the second round, maybe in our rookie drafts. And then you'd be like, you might find like a Brandon Ayuk or he's not really Higgins, because I was really high on Higgins and I took him 2-1, I think, in GA. But you could get these kind of players like the 2-4, 2-5, and then you look back and then they've jumped, not like a whole round in value, but they're now like mid to late first round value. So you've kind of made money on them already. Josh Downs is very similar to them. He's a really good route runner, but he's majority the slot. But in theory, that's kind of where the NFL's going now. It's kind of like 3 wide sets, and you don't really need big X guys all the time. So some of these guys are going to, depending on where their landing spot is, they're going to fall, and people are going to be like, oh, I really like where he's fallen, and they're just going to push him up the draft again. So, but it's not as deep as running back. I'd probably say like running back's like B-. And then this is like C+ as wide receivers. But the first 4, I think they're locked for having stonewall good NFL careers. And then everyone else, I think it could come down to where their landing spot is, to be honest. You will make money on a few of these guys if you predict it right.
Okay, so let's hit tight end. Hearing good things about this tight end class.
Yeah.
So where do you fall with the tight ends?
Tight ends, for me, this is like the best class since Evan Ingram and Njoku, that sort of year. And if I'm honest, I think that the standard of tight ends that are coming out now, if you look at it over the last few years now, is always traits over production at college. So like, if you look at their production on some of these guys, you're like, how is this guy going in the first round or the second round? He's only ever caught 2 touchdowns in his career, and he's like caught like 400 yards. But it's just a real traits position. Like, if you look in historically good tight ends throughout like the last 10 years or something, they've all got really high traits of athleticism and maybe basketball backgrounds or something like that. So, and there's a few of these guys, I think that there's quite a few of these guys, I think that it's going to be a really good class. And then we'll look back on it in, say, 4 years' time, and I could see 4 of these guys being in the top 10 of your tight end ranking dynasty. So I think that there's a lot. I think there's a lot of people saying that they could see up to 12 tight ends get drafted total, and they reckon that pretty much nearly all of them will be gone by round 4.
Really?
So that's really high end drafting of tight ends. So it's just some of the stuff that what I've heard in regards to the higher I think what happens is the high caliber tight ends will get drafted high, sort of late round 1, early round 2, and then because they go so early, it just pushes everybody else up. So I think that because it's not an amazing draft this year, so when you're quite good, even at like not a premier position, I think that you're going to get more highly drafted. So I just think, and some of these guys' traits are like really, so it'd be interesting to see who gets drafted first. I think I personally would draft Kincaid 1. I think he's more rounded. I think he's kind of that sort of George Kittle, Kelsey-esque player. Seems to find space. Like if you watch him for Utah, he's got great like superb hands, but he just seems to know what to do to find the space like Kelsey does. Like Kelsey's not hugely athletic, but he just seems to find the hole. And then when he's got the ball in his hands, he's so hard to bring down. That's kind of what Kincaid is. So I think that Kincaid will go 1. He would be my 1. And then you've got probably 3 guys that are very close together. Michael Mayer from Notre Dame, he's more of your well-rounded tight end. I would say more of like your Pat Fryermuth kind of player. Maybe Hunter Henry when he was coming out, but he's probably got a little bit better hands. But he probably didn't have the combine that he wanted to because these other guys are just far more athletic. Darnell Washington's just a freak, like 6'7" or 6'8" or something, and he was like 270 and won like a 4.64 or something.
Yeah, he was fun to watch at the combine.
He was silly, but it's because. But then if you watch, and everyone's like, "Oh well, he should be catching. He's so good. He should be catching more ball in college." But how did Georgia not use him more? And it's because they had Brock Bowers. So, like, if you watch any Georgia tape and you see Brock Bowers, you'll be like, "This guy could be." I know Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to come out next year, but Brock Bowers in the tight end premium next year is going to be legit Kyle Pitts value. So he is seriously good. So that's probably why you don't see the production on tape or in his stats. You're just like, this guy's only ever caught like 300 passing yards. Like, why don't they use him? But he's such a freak in regards to his height that if he falls at the right team, someone could use him really well. Like if he fell, I know that they probably won't use him now because they've got 2 guys there like Hunter Henry and Gesicki, but Belichick would know what to do with him. So if you go through the coaching tree of who was there during Belichick's tenure when he had Gronkowski and Hernandez, and find which coaches are now coaching in the NFL, tight ends coaches or head coaches, and they're like, there's a direct link there to Belichick and how he used them guys, then I could seriously see him putting up stupid ass points for fantasy, and especially in tight end premium, it's definitely worth a punt on these guys. So he would be 3. Luke Muscat is really quick, really good. But I don't know if he's got that high ceiling as much as these other 3. I think that he might fall into a position where he's kind of like used in a committee rather than the straight tight end, because he needs to polish up his blocking to stay on the field. And then after that, it's like a little bit more of a mess. Probably Tucker Kraft, San Diego State, Sam Laporta, Iowa. All of these guys are going to be maybe either a committee starter or they're going to be on an NFL team like pretty high in this draft. Josh Wiley from Cincinnati, Will Mallory maybe from Miami, and then there's Jack Kuntz. He was like a combine darling if anybody knew about him, but he was at Penn State when what can I think of his name? It's just come out. I think Komet was there. That was it. Komet was there, and this guy was there, and because Komet was there, they couldn't get on the field, and then he went to Old Dominion and he just completely dominated, which is what you'd want him to do because obviously he's clearly better than the competition he's playing in. But his combine was just outstanding. Like he was like high percentile of literally everything that he did. So I think he's like 6'7", 6'8" again. So he's a big ass dude. So he might be one to keep an eye on, because I could see somebody taking him and using them traits. So obviously when like Kittle came out and a few of these guys came out, they weren't like high draft picks. So Kuntz would be one that I think that might go round 3, round 4 in the NFL draft. But he'd definitely be someone I'd be keeping an eye on. And if I had a late round 2 pick and I wasn't too sure what to do, and say if I was weak at tight end, or if it was tight end premium, I'd be like, I might take a punt on this geezer, because I think that he could be very good, could be very, very good.
Yeah, I'm a fan of taking punts on geezers as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Wow. Well, that's a lot of information. So anything we left out that you want to kind of throw in there on anything?
I would just say, like, for most of these leagues, obviously everybody's like knows what formats and bits and pieces they are. Like every year, Zach always bangs on about quarterback positions and how highly scoring they are and stuff like that. But I would definitely look over the formats and some of what you're getting points for these players, and say, like, I think Jason's talked about it as well before, where does drafting a wide receiver 4 matter as much as drafting your tight end 2? Yeah, because the points on a tight end premium is far more important to have a solid backup tight end than it would be, say, for having a wide receiver 4 as depth. Is there possibility I can get better players in positions of need, and maybe trade down to do it, or some aspects trade up to do it? Just look over your roster and see what you kind of need, and I would then evaluate some of these guys, and then obviously look at the actual draft as well. So we always talk about it every year, that draft position does matter. So, like, I know that it's always talent over everything else, but sometimes if they're just not schematically well placed into the right team, and this wouldn't work out well. And you will find out a lot of this information just by following probably some of the podcasts that everyone else listens to, like you would normally listen to, and experts that you follow. You'll be able to find all this information coming up to each and every one of your rookie drafts. So obviously I think our JV one is quite soon after the draft, so there won't be as much information, which is kind of handy for people like me who look at it far earlier than other people, that if it gets to August and there's a few people that are booming and up in training camp, then it pushes their stock up a little bit, and all of a sudden you don't get the value that you would have done if it was prior. So just keep your ear to the ground, listen to the people that you like to listen to, monitor the teams and what they're drafting, and then assess your own rosters, and then try and pick up value where you can.
Good advice. And I like to follow and listen to Ash Till, and I'm glad that we had this opportunity. I think this is a fun podcast every year, and I appreciate your scheduling and making this happen.
No, thanks for waking up early, because obviously it's bright and early over there. Clock's changed. It was a scheduling nightmare for us over this weekend, though, wasn't it? Like us predicting the time frames, because obviously at one point I was like, is it 12 o'clock over there? No, it's 1 o'clock. Oh, I'm glad I checked, because the clocks went forward for us last night. So my kids have had an hour. It feels like we've slept a little bit longer, but in actual facts, we've probably not slept any longer at all. So
no doubt,
that's a disappointing aspect. My kids have just got over chicken pox, so I am shattered, to say the least. To be fair, absolutely shattered. My youngest was a nightmare with it.
Sorry to hear it.
Yeah, but I'm used to no sleep anyway. So,
well, from the shattered Ash and the overweight Rene, we'll talk to you guys later. See you on the podcast land.